Nashville Public Library. On behalf of the entire Nashville Public Library team, I'd like to welcome you today. We are honored that Mayor O'Connell has chosen NPL to host today's event. I admit that I'm a bit biased towards libraries. I've been working in them for 44 years, but I can't think of a better place for today's conversation than Nashville Public Library. We are Nashville's civic living room. Our institution is built on learning and a commitment to bringing people together. And Mayor O'Connell has invited everyone to Nashville to have a meaningful conversation about our city's future. And as we all know, great conversations begin with great questions. On that note, I'd like to talk briefly about how today's program will go. As you entered, you should have received an index card and a pencil. And if you didn't, please wave at one of the ushers, and they will be happy to get you what you need. We will collect everyone's questions and answer as many of them as possible during a moderated Q&A. You don't have to wait to submit your questions, just hand them to the ushers at any point. And with that, it is now my pleasure to welcome Mayor Freddie O'Connell to the stage. Mayor O'Connell has been a friend and a champion of the library, both prior to his election when he served on the Metro Council and now as he leads our city into a successful future. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Thank you, Terry, and I am so excited to see this auditorium almost full for today. Thanks for joining us at the Downtown Library. I walked over from the office, which is actually a great experience even on a gray fall day like today, and I know that many of you are, like me, here because you didn't just choose to live in this city, but you also love this city. And you want to see it work better for everyone who lives here. That was the focus of my campaign, and it will be the focus of my time as mayor. As we start, I know I didn't even get a chance to track, but we have several of my colleagues on the Metro Council and Metro department heads here. Would you all help thank them for public leadership in this moment? This, to me, is what is so exciting about today, and what was so exciting about our inauguration is that the public is both us as people and also the people who choose to lead as servants, which the elected officials I know, the people in Metro who do the important work of the city day by day do. So thank you all also for being here. Just after the election, knowing that we wouldn't have much time before I actually took office, we created a transition process to work alongside the team we're building in the mayor's office. This let us hit the ground running with governing while we also absorbed ideas from residents. This afternoon, we're going to share recommendations from 3 committees that worked in that transition process that touch almost every aspect of local government and our most pressing challenges. But they also address our most exciting opportunities. In these recommendations, you will find our guiding principles and policy priorities that I hope allow us to move forward together over the next 4 years. Guiding principles establish our North Stars, setting our course for years to come. Policy recommendations identify near-term solutions and proven ideas that are ready for action now. In effect, this is our plan to make progress together. The day after the election, I invited Dr. Alex Jahanger, Christy Pruitt-Haynes, and David Esquivel to lead 3 committees: How Nashville Moves, How Nashville Works, and How Nashville Grows. Not only did they say yes, thank you, each of them helped build their own committees to dive into important work. How Nashville Moves explores how we move around the city conveniently and safely however we like, whether we want to walk to a park, commute by bike, or take transit to a Preds game. Investing in transportation infrastructure and traffic management solutions that benefit all Nashvillians. How Nashville Works imagines how city services work well all the time and how we make Nashville the premier customer service organization in the city. This is how we lay the foundation to tackle big issues from affordable housing to community safety to education. How Nashville Grows examines how we build a better Nashville for Nashvillians and being intentional about that. This includes not just the incredible opportunity on the East Bank, but also the other 500 square miles of Davidson County. You're going to hear from each of our committee chairs shortly, but first I'd like to thank them and every member of these three committees. Serving with us on the How Nashville Moves Committee, Glenn Farner, Aaron Hafkinshield, Shauna Singh Huey, Ashley Northington, Stephanie Tetro, Gail Carr-Williams, Senator Jeff Yarbrough, and Chair Dr. Alex Jahanger. For How Nashville Works, Jim Gingrich, Edward Henley, LaShawn Oliver, Jeannie Pupo Walker, Sydney Rogers, Marcus Whitney, and Chair Christy Pruitt-Haynes. For How Nashville Grows, Adolfo Birch, Jackie Gomez, Robert Higgins, Mike Hodge, Clay Richards, Wesley Smith, Kanika Young, and Chair David Esquivel. Can you all thank them for the way that they have chosen to serve the city? Now I'd like to invite each of the committee co-chairs to the podium one at a time so they can share their work. Thank you once again. I'm looking forward to these presentations. We'll begin with Dr. Alex Jahanger, Chair of the How Nashville Moves Committee. Yeah. I think I'm sitting here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike's good. All right, I see the people back there. Really appreciate you inviting us to be a part of this. You know, I think it's no secret you've taken office during a very interesting and exciting time for opportunity around transit and transportation infrastructure. And throughout your campaign and before you even ran for mayor, I think all of us know the enthusiasm you shared. And so the National Moves Committee tried to take that urgency and the excitement that you've shared both as a council member and as mayor and brought that into our work. As you mentioned, as you'll see both in my presentation and my colleagues' presentations, we'll present some guidelines that really, as you mentioned, will be the North Star for what we hope your administration focuses on as you think through these policies. And there'll be some policy recommendations which hopefully will be short-term action items that we hope that you will consider as you move forward. So with that, there we go. Technical difficulties. Wow. Who's running this thing? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay.
Let me try this button.
Hey, there you go.
All right. Nope, just kidding. That's Nashville Grows. All right. Let me try this one. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. If only your mayor wasn't a professional in computer stuff. There we go. I think we're...
Probably should have been involved in the run of show here.
Yes, sir.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you for your patience. So, Mr. Mayor, I think, as we mentioned, we wanted to really start with some guiding principles for you. And the first one is this, Mr. Mayor. You've been a leader in this area for 2 decades or more. And what's really important for us is you've been an advocate for modern multimodal transportation for 2 decades. And now that you're mayor, it's truly time for bold solutions, but bold solutions that are based on data. They are bold solutions that are made with the community needs in mind, and bold solutions that really come up through your discussions and through your leadership. Secondly, Mr. Mayor, I think what is really important is it's time to accelerate the development of safe, reliable, and accessible transportation infrastructures that all Nashvillians can build their life around. What does this mean? More sidewalks, more bikeways, more crosswalks, more reliable bus paths, more easy ways for people to access transit. It's very important as you start thinking about policy to always keep that North Star in mind. And Mr. Mayor, I think this is actually one of my favorite slides in this whole thing. I think it's a great picture. it's no question that you have been a champion, but now you have the opportunity as mayor to truly lead as a transit champion for our city. We ask that you really take that ownership and really serve as the person who helps set, deliver on, and celebrate the city's transportation agenda and the progress that has been made to realize it. I think it's really great that you highlight how you walked here on some sidewalks. So I think as we talk about this, transit and transportation infrastructure is going to be really important. And finally, Mr. Mayor, our last guideline is this. Look, it is no question you're going to have to lead, but I think it's important for you to have success. You must engage all aspects of our city. You must engage riders, neighborhood leaders, council members, department heads. You alone can't do this by yourself. And I think that's going to be really important as you start making decisions over the next many years. So with that, I wanted to just kind of speak to you briefly about our policy recommendations. First, Mr. Mayor, I think if you want to speak to Nashvillians about expanding the transit infrastructure and transportation and improve multimodal infrastructure, Nashvillians need to gain confidence in what we have. As in preparation for this, I was speaking to someone this morning, actually, for breakfast, and I told him what we were doing, and he looked at me and he said, well, I don't actually know what we have. All right, and I think the first thing you need to do is help rebuild trust in our system, because what we do have is actually pretty awesome. I've had the past month or so, I've really had an opportunity to learn some of the stuff we had. So you need to celebrate perhaps some of the great successes we're having in the short term. NDOT just opened the Traffic Management Center, which will soon enable everyone for them to monitor traffic flow and help work through that. You have an upcoming completion of Connect Downtown, which talks about how best you can reduce congestion in the city's core. And then in spring of 24, you have the opening of the North Nashville New Transit Hub. These are things you and your predecessors have already done. We need people in the city to know that it's happening. So this isn't a conversation of what we're going to do. There's stuff we're doing right now. You should use your office to let people know about that. Now, a bold plan, however, is nothing without funding, and a dedicated source of funding will be critical. And I think this probably doesn't come as a surprise to you, but I think one decision you need to make very early is whether or not we're going to have a transit referendum to work on a dedicated source of funding. If you decide to pursue a referendum, there's several items that you should keep in mind. First, you need to build an independent and inclusive transit advocacy coalition. Not just the great people who have been working on transit for years, but people who have never engaged on the topic. This is really going to be an all-in-Nashville effort, and something that you are going to help build, and something that's going to include transit-dependent riders as well as people who have never used transit before. You're going to have to constantly communicate why these investments in transit and transportation infrastructure matters to everyone. And you're going to have to develop a plan with equity at the heart of the plan and explain why this works for all Nashvillians. Thirdly, Mr. Mayor, is you need to one thing I thought was very interesting during our discussion, we met with department heads and other things. There are high-yield, low-cost things that could be done right now that have not gotten done because of, for lack of a better word, just institutional silos, maybe red tape, things that I think can be solved if department leaders meet regularly to discuss these barriers in the short term. So I'll give you an example. There was a discussion we had, and apparently there's a bus route that at certain times it rains a lot. This well-traveled area gets flooded. And so the bus has to be rerouted. People don't know where the new route is. Things that perhaps bringing together regular leaders of NDOT, water, we go all together on a regular basis, talk about what are some high-yield, low-cost infrastructure things that can be done right now. You need to bring together that group. This group has been together in the past, but apparently in the more recent past, that hasn't happened. And finally, Mr. Mayor, we need you to recognize that this is not, again, a national-only issue. Regional coordination is critical to helping minimize the time Nashvillians spend in traffic. And you're going to need to partner with other Middle Tennessee leaders and mayors specifically around this. And as you start thinking about a transit referendum or plans what a referendum can do, it really needs to explain to everyone how this connects with the region overall. So that, Mr. Mayor, in short, is what the National Moves Committee recommends, and we'd love to have a dialogue and discussion about any of these areas.
Yeah, I think maybe my first question is back up a step because I realize I didn't describe it. How did your committee process work?
So our committee, as you've read the committee members, a lot of really amazing subject matter experts. We would meet weekly, several hours a week, and the first part of our meeting we would have experts, department leaders and other experts in this area, regional leaders, and it would just be an open dialogue with these people. What are the challenges they see? What are opportunities they see? What would they like to see from an O'Connell administration as it comes to transit? And we would take that information, we would discuss it internally, we would write reports, we'd edit the report, we would go back and forth, but it really was a constant dialogue of about 6 weeks of work.
And I will ask this, over the course of those meetings, as you met, did anybody on the committee do anything other than drive?
You know, we met at WeGo Central. So I would like to highlight WeGo Central is amazing, and I've only been there once ever in the time of my committee. And you know, it's interesting you asked that question. I lived in D.C. for a while for college, and I had never owned a car. I biked, I used public transportation, I walked. I've lived in Nashville for all but about 13 years of my life. I've never once been on a bus. I walked down where I work on sidewalks yesterday. I was like, man, this is great. I wish I had some of those on a house. So, short answer, I don't believe anyone in our committee took any kind of public transportation to our meetings, including our meeting at WeGo Central, probably been the easiest place to take public transportation to.
And the reason I ask that is because I think it's actually connected to the next committee's work. There's a lot of how people experience things like transit that I think fold into this conversation, but have a lot to do with that. So as homework, I think I'm going to invite you on a bus ride sometime.
I would love it. There's some great buses I've learned.
Yeah, there are some great routes. Yeah. All right, well, great. Thank you so much for that. And I think we're going to have time toward the end for questions. So I'll save those from the audience, but no, really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm going to help my colleague come up this area.
Yeah. Shauna's got it.
Shauna, you got it. And I have to say, during hospitalization, we worked on this. So I think if anyone here, amazing.
So Christy worked even through adversity to do this. So will you all help me welcome Christy Pruitt-Haynes to the stage?
I'm coming.
Christy chaired the Works Report.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Sorry it took me a moment to get up here. But hello, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for having us here today. So the Nashville Works Committee was tasked with coming up with recommendations that will improve the experience of all Nashvillians in our interactions with Metro government. Mayor O'Connell, you've spoken several times about adding trust and confidence with each Nashvillian in Metro, and more specifically, really creating that best-in-class experience in all of our interactions with all departments within Metro. One of the ways you're doing that is in creating those 15 fixes. You talked a lot about them during your campaign and continue to speak of them as those true priorities that you'll focus on during your tenure. The committee was really tasked with helping to realize those 15 fixes. So in doing that, what we realized very quickly is the 15 fixes are the what. Those are the priorities. Those are the things that are really going to make Nashville work for all Nashvillians. So we took our task as coming up with the how. How can each of the wonderful departments that are already established within Metro really realize and push forward those 15 fixes? So that's what we focused on, really coming up with the how that's going to work. So our recommendations provide some ideas that each department can then interpret, excuse me, and make a part of their day-to-day work lives. So we first started, similar to the earlier committee, with guiding principles. So let's see if I can get this to move in the right direction here.
Oh, it looks good.
All right, there you go. Thank you for teaching me how to do that quickly. we learn quick around here. So our guiding principles we really saw as the vision, as the foundation that each department's strategies will then be built on. So we came up with 4 guiding principles that we felt were really critical and would serve as that underpinning for all of the work. So the first is, love it when they move the right direction. The first is all around accessibility. Metro government should be accessible to all Nashvillians. They should be able to communicate with the government in a way that works well for them and really interact in a way that's going to prioritize their needs. We want things such as this meeting to be in locations that are accessible, but also thinking about how people are notified about meetings to make sure that everyone is able to enact and engage. The next guiding principle that we really established is around transparency, having that open and honest communication. And when we think about transparency, Mayor, our thought was not just about sharing information, but also soliciting information from citizens and from Nashvillians. That next guiding principle that we really thought a lot about was accountability. We want to make sure that Metro leaders hold themselves accountable to Nashvillians and produce regular reports, letting people know what's going on, and that are really talking about a lot of the progress that are being made, not only on the 15 fixes, but on all of the initiatives that your administration undertakes. And then finally, and this is one we feel is really important, collaboration. We thought that it's going to take a true culture of collaboration, fostering that, making sure that all departments and all other entities work together. Alex just talked some about with the regional transit, having that collaboration with some of our neighboring cities. So collaboration is that 4th guiding principle that we feel is going to be really important to move forward, again, not only those 15 fixes, but all of the initiatives. So we saw these principles as the foundation for all of our recommendations and all of the strategies that then each of the departments will enact and put forward as they move ahead. So now I'd love to actually get into some of our recommendations. There we go. So our first recommendation is the administration should ensure that every Metro department delivers excellent customer service and that every Nashvillian can interact with Metro government in a way that works best for them. So when we talked a lot about that, and our committee, I think, is made up of a very diverse group of experts, which we thought was really important because we wanted to make sure that all of the recommendations would resonate for every department around Metro. So we were thrilled, and I am personally thrilled and thankful to everyone who worked with us. But in thinking about really providing that best in service experience, it starts with providing the resources. Oftentimes when we say resources, people immediately think of people, and that's part of it, but also technology, also equipment, things of that nature, making sure every department has what they need so they can remove the barriers and really do their jobs as effectively as possible. Our next thought around this one is really better understanding the current customer experience. So that's going to be looking at current data, but also continuing to solicit feedback and factoring that into all the decisions that are made. We also thought as one of our recommendations that department heads can even look at creating goals around metrics. Just again, using that data and making sure that those goals are reinforced with how we evaluate individuals, how we evaluate experiences, etc. And then Alex actually mentioned this also, doing all we can to eliminate that red tape. So any of those barriers to success, anything that keeps those departments from being able to interact effectively together. So we felt all of that is going to really add to that overall customer experience. Our next recommendation is that the administration should adequately resource Hub Nashville and should empower its team to clearly communicate with Nashvillians and proactively address their requests. Hub Nashville, for those who don't know and haven't had a chance to interact with it, is really that central starting point for so many engagements and so many interactions with the government. And Mayor, I know you realize how important Hub Nashville is. So knowing that it's the starting point in that central system, we want to make sure that it's properly resourced. So that's going to include and give customers the ability to, once they submit a ticket in Hub Nashville or a request, that they can actually follow along in that process. So that goes back to our earlier recommendation around technology, making sure that everyone is able to access that. The other thing that has a lot to do with Hub Nashville, which goes to the guiding principle of collaboration, making sure so many of the Metro departments and our partners are all connected and linked to Hub Nashville. That's going to allow us to, if a call comes into Hub Nashville that then needs to be transferred over to the police department or school system, whomever that may be, that it's able to happen in that system. And again, they have that accountability to see how that's progressing along. So that goes back to that collaboration, but it's really going to allow Nashvillians to follow with all of their issues. And then also really empowering the Hub staff to continue to prioritize some of the long-term issues that they're seeing. A great example of that is recently they were able to look at a lot of data and based on that changed how abandoned cars were handled in the city. So that's something that not many of us think about on a day-to-day basis, but they had the ability and were empowered to say, this is an issue that's happening more frequently. Let's look at our current processes and make sure that we're handling it as effectively as we can. And we would love to see that continue. Our third recommendation is that the administration should prioritize openness and accountability in all Metro policy decisions. As you know, Mayor, government is so much stronger when all Nashvillians participate in that decision-making and they're able to and know how to reach out to their officials. So having public forums that have adequate notice, that are in areas that are accessible, is going to be critical to really continuing that openness. And as I mentioned before, really moving from just openness or sharing information to true engagement, where we're soliciting input from all participants and all Nashvillians. Another thought around that is working with offices like the New Americans and neighborhoods and community engagement to make sure they're very aware of everything going on so they can be a true part of that outreach to all Nashvillians. And then our final recommendation is to lead the efforts to increase collaboration and problem solving among Metro leaders. Decisions and actions can no longer be made in silos. And we all get caught up in our day-to-day actions and really focus on what it is on our desk. But we know that things are going to be much more efficient and effective when those departments can work together, particularly around decisions that involve several departments. A great example of that is in the creation of a community safety plan, that being one of your 15 fixes, and we know that's a priority. That's going to be something that involves most departments within Metro. So really prioritizing that collaboration, making sure that they're working together and making sure that all of the tools are in place so they can do that effectively. So those are our 4 recommendations that we're putting forward. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much to my committee. I really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone for giving me a little patience in getting up here this afternoon. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Well, Christy, thank you. And especially given that you are recovering, really appreciate the persistence I know it took to be a part of this.
Absolutely.
Same as Alex, would you, I know every committee kind of had your own process and rhythm. Can you tell us a little bit about how you all worked and who you met with?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is really important to call out is first, just in the forming of our committee. When we looked across the 15 fixes, they are diverse. They talk about school systems, they talk about safety. So when pulling together the committee, it was really important that I had individuals who had expertise in a number of different areas. So that was the real first priority, to make sure we had the right people on that committee. And I think we did a really good job. Obviously, I'm biased in my opinion on that. But knowing that ultimately each of these recommendations were going to need to resonate for all Metro departments, we wanted to make sure that our committee could read through those through their own lens of expertise and that they would resonate and be something that's actionable. So that was an important first step. We then met weekly, typically by Zoom for about an hour and a half or so, and had some really healthy debates. We started out by looking at those 15 fixes and agreed that this is the what, these are the priorities, so let's really focus on the how we can do this. Let's focus on that experience to make sure each department has what they need to move these forward. In doing so, we met with a number of individuals across Metro because they are the experts, and we really wanted to acknowledge the expertise that already existed. They know the day-to-day issues better than we do. So we listened to them. Kristen and Aaron and so many others were just instrumental in providing us a lot of data on what's already been done, so we can make sure our recommendations weren't just a repeat of what's already happened. So we spent a lot of hours together, and I think came up with a solid list of recommendations that can apply across all areas.
Thanks, and I think you just hinted at the answer to my next question, but what you just described feels a lot to me like you as a committee were able to sort of live the principles that you talked about. Did you face, as you did your work, any barriers, or did the work that you did apply any lessons that aren't immediately available here, right? It seems like you did, you found all the diversity and subject matter expertise you needed, that you were engaged with metro departments. Did you confront any barriers to the work of the committee?
I wouldn't say we confronted any barriers. What I would say is we confronted a lot of passion and interest, which is what we hoped for. You know, that's what we hoped for. When I say we had some healthy debates, I truly mean that, but I think it resulted in a much stronger product. And having all of the individuals that we spoke to, everyone fortunately had some type of engagement with Metro government, whether it was through the school system, through trying to get some zoning approved or a permit. So everyone was able to really add their individual kind of experiences, which I think resulted in a much stronger finished product. So I was very, very thankful and appreciative of that. So there weren't barriers, there was just a lot of passion.
Did you wind up engaging, either through that process or with the committee, any customer service professionals, anybody whose day-to-day job is that?
Within Metro, yes. So we spoke with Kristen, who is, as you know, does a little of everything, honestly, yeah. But such a central part of her role, as well as Aaron, who is sort of the queen of Hub Nashville, if you will. So much of what they focus on a day-to-day basis is all about that public-facing side of it. They're aware of the issues, and we're really able to elevate what some of those bigger ones are. We didn't outside of Metro, but each of us, again, were able to kind of bring in our own customer service lens and how we defined a really positive customer service experience. And in doing that, I think we agreed having a positive customer service experience is less about the final outcome, because you may not always get what you want. You know, we recognize that, but it's about the process, and it's about making sure that you at least understand the final decision, even if you don't agree with it, and you see that it's moving through a process, and you have that accountability, and you know what to follow up with. So I think in each of us really thinking about our own positive customer service experiences, it was able to really add a layer to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think similar to that, you touched a little bit on this, and I thought about it even today because we got some feedback about doing this at 1:30, and there's such a tension because we know that so many people in Metro, yes, we want to catch them in an opportunity where they can fit this into their workday because we're trying to make government better, but we also knew it would be a challenge for some people to be here at 1:30. Mm-hmm. Did you all wind up doing any kind of, and we'll dig into it because I think the principle still matters, was there any work to inventory audit or, you know, prioritize those things where people are like, hey, I would do this every month, but I can't because X? Did that come up?
Not in our direct work, but we did look at a lot of the data that had already been gathered. And even in the simple task of coming up with when we as a committee met, we realized there is no time that's going to make everybody happy. Yeah. We all have a million different things going. So that's one of the recommendations as we think about continuing that outreach and continuing to solicit data and input from the public. That's one of the questions we would ask. What's the best way to engage? What's the best time? Is it having something like this and then having a replay later so those who can't be there? But again, I think just in going through the process of trying to pull all of us together, we realized it's a slightly impossible task. But the more you ask the questions and the more you engage to get additional feedback, the better you can get at it.
I appreciate that. And this is an audience question. How many people in here have submitted a Hub Nashville request at any point? Yeah, so there you go. For anybody watching who isn't present, most of the room raised their hands. And it is a great app. I know Aaron Williams in our office works hard on it every day, and we've got an incredible team at the Department of Emergency Communications who's working within that. So Christy, thank you all. Will you help thank Christy and her committee? All right. And last but certainly not least, we will welcome David Esquivel to the stage.
Mr. Mayor, may I make, if you guys have questions, I apologize, I should have said that at the end of mine. If you have the note cards, if you can start writing your questions down for any of our work or David's and start handing them towards the center. So near the center aisles, and there'll be people who come collect them. So please start that process, and obviously you're welcome to do that after Ms. Esquivel is done too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, so I think there's index cards. You can see Alex walking around the room to help collect them. David, how Nashville grows.
How Nashville grows. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. I'll start out by recognizing what everyone here knows, which is that Nashville is one of America's fastest growing cities. With that growth comes both challenges and opportunities. And that's something that as Nashvillians we've been keenly aware of. Today, too many Nashvillians feel like that growth, they have experienced it more as challenges than as opportunities. And you have charged our committee to address that trend and specifically to consider the development that is occurring and will occur for decades on the East Bank, but not in isolation, but to consider that development as a prototype for development throughout the city. So with that background, we, like the other committees, started with guiding principles, and we have 4 guiding principles. The first is that Metro should invest in infrastructure, affordable housing, and other community assets in neighborhoods throughout the city at a level that is equivalent in impact to the investments currently being made in the East Bank. Our second guiding principle is that decisions about priorities for development should be open and transparent. Nashvillians should know how projects will be funded, particularly if the city's future revenues are implicated, and what sort of economic impact those projects will have. Our third guiding principle is accountability. Nashvillians who provide input into planning processes should get updates about how their feedback was incorporated or why it was not incorporated. Our fourth guiding principle is a matter of balance and priorities, and it's a theme that carried throughout the weeks in which our committee met, and that is that in the East Bank and in other neighborhoods, community identified needs should not be subsumed by the goal of maximizing revenue. Finding a balance between maximizing city revenue and meeting community needs is critical. These guiding principles have led us to 6 specific policy recommendations. First, your office and its partners should clearly communicate the costs of Metro's investments for East Bank infrastructure and how and to what extent those costs can be recouped. We know that the East Bank negotiations are ongoing as we speak, and changing circumstances may require your administration to make decisions about how the land there will be used. True community engagement will require Nashvillians to understand the factors that influence these decisions. And to ensure transparency in decision-making, your office should provide regular East Bank updates to the community, including through the Metro Council's East Bank Committee. And these updates and information should continue through the life of the project. Second, Mr. Mayor, your administration should maintain focus on Metro Planning's East Bank Vision Plan to ensure that the East Bank becomes a vibrant neighborhood that reflects Nashville's rich diversity and prioritizes affordable housing. East Bank should become a neighborhood where Nashvillians live, work, and play year-round, not just on stadium event days. It should mirror the cultural and economic diversity of our city, the rich diversity of our city. In other words, it should not be an extension of Nashville's tourism and entertainment district. It should be something different. In the East Bank, decision makers should deploy community assets to meet community needs. The committee believes that locating a diversity of affordable housing in the East Bank should continue to be a priority. Further, the East Bank should set a new standard for multimodal transportation options in Nashville, which include bus rapid transit, protected bikeways, and a complete network of quality sidewalks. Our third recommendation is that your office and its partners should empower Nashville's neighborhoods to articulate and advocate for their priorities. Through our meetings and discussions, we believe that a replicable model of community engagement is one that came out of the Wedgwood-Houston neighborhood. In Wedgwood, Houston, neighbors came together to create a community-built framework that maps community assets and assesses community needs. Structures like this allow neighborhoods to ensure that development that occurs in those neighborhoods is consistent with a community-based vision. Neighborhoods across Nashville should have access to tools to create these kinds of community-based visions. And they should work with a strengthened Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods, Metro Planning, Metro Council, and community partners. These community development frameworks should include a broad range of input, particularly from those who are traditionally underrepresented in these processes. Fourth, your administration should identify or create a team or entity that can bring Metro's plans to reality. This is something that our committee heard from nearly every corner and was put very vividly by several people, which is that Metro has, and Metro Planning in particular, has drawn some very pretty maps. And much of that has been based on community input and broad efforts to establish community priorities. But those maps lack an implementation mechanism to move them to reality. The East Bank process has illustrated the need for a new and adequately resourced entity or a new team of leaders from existing entities that focuses on implementation and publicly communicates the timeline and details of Metro-funded projects. Metro already has many of the plans that it needs, and now your office should work with Metro departments, neighborhood leaders, and other stakeholders to determine the best way to get these plans implemented. Our fifth recommendation is to make the most of Metro-owned land and buildings. Imagine East Bank serves actually as a good prototype for this recommendation, where 117 acres of Metro-owned land has been studied and analyzed as to put to its highest and best use. Your office should accelerate efforts to do the same thing for other underutilized land and buildings throughout the city. Specifically, we advocate ongoing efforts to identify Metro-owned property that would be suitable for affordable housing. Through Barnes Fund grants to nonprofits, 10 former Metro properties are currently being developed for affordable housing. 14 more are available for future development. We think this is a good start and it should be expanded. Your administration should also formalize Metro's approach to work with the community to determine the best and highest use of surplus property. As an example, the Global Mall or former schools on Brick Church Pike. You should form a steering committee to coordinate initial recommendations around these decisions. And over time, a more formal solution, one with the capacity to oversee and resource these processes may be needed. And finally, Mr. Mayor, your administration should prioritize investments across Nashville that are equivalent in impact to those made in the East Bank. The East Bank will outlast your administration and will outlast several administrations to follow. In that long timeline, you should set the tone early to ensure that neighborhoods throughout the city will benefit from equally impactful investments. The mayor's office should work with metro departments and stakeholders to identify a priority list of rapidly transforming areas in our city and work with the community to craft a vision for their growth. And on this front, our committee believes that Nashville Next is a good foundation for this effort. Your office should then partner with communities in those areas to create a list of concrete investments that meet community needs and can happen within the next 5 years, focusing on items that are already part of the capital improvements budget. With that, Mr. Mayor, thank you. It has been a real pleasure. Several members of our committee are here, and it has been an honor and a pleasure to do this work and present you these recommendations.
All right. Can you all thank David and his committee? So I'll ask you to do the same thing as the other chairs. Can you talk a little bit about the process and what you all did as a committee to help build this report?
Yes, I like to start with the actual place that we met. We received the generous hospitality of one of the members of our committee, Robert Higgins, who owns a restaurant, and he hosted us every Wednesday morning from 8 to 10 a.m. in his restaurant, where we literally gathered around a table, a breakfast table, and had these discussions. I think it's a nice imagery of the impetus for the recommendations that we're giving you. I will say that like many tables people are going to gather around at Thanksgiving, it was not without controversy. We had a true diversity of people and views, and sometimes those views were expressed very directly, but it was around a table sharing a meal, and I hope that the result of that is reflected in the consensus that we were able to achieve despite or maybe because of that diversity. But we followed a similar process to the other committees. We heard each week from subject matter experts, neighborhood leaders, community leaders, former Metro Council members, people who have done development in Nashville, people within Metro planning. And so we were not the subject matter experts, but we heard as a community, a people, a diverse community, what those experts had to say, the information they provided, and from that had many discussions that led to this.
I have two follow-up questions, I think, related to that. One, did you or any of the committee members go visit the current East Bank during this process?
We did not physically take a tour of the current East Bank.
And then similarly, I think, it sounded like you were one location primarily, which I get because you had a host, which was wonderful, but any other, hey, we went in all four cardinal directions, or looking at the county as a whole? I know you referenced Nashville Next and some of the things that we're
Yes, I would say that took place virtually through the information that we got. Yep. and through, we were committed as part of our process to be well educated about these things. And so although the committee didn't physically visit and see places in advance of each meeting, there were extensive materials that our invitees provided to us, and many of those things were very helpful in giving us at least a virtual look at the specific projects and recommendations that we were focused on.
Got it. And then I think it started while you all were midway. Did you wind up engaging at all with any of the members of the East Bank Committee on the Metro Council?
No, we did not. That process, the East Bank Committee formed about halfway through our tenure, and so we had not, although once we became aware of it, it is part of our report, because we think in terms of community, both informing the community and receiving community input into the East Bank process, the Metro Council Committee is is a good vehicle for communication both ways.
Right. Before we move on to Q&A in the room, I also want to say you all have just seen these ideas come to life. I think it's worth thanking Ayumi Bennett, who did the illustrations that really did visualize that. David, I think you might be handing it over to Shauna at this point.
It is my duty as MC now to kick it to. So let me reiterate the request that if you have questions, and you will, if you'll put those on the note card and make those ways to the center, Shauna Huey will now serve as the proctor of the questions, and we're very excited to see what questions and comments people have, and we'll take it in a discussion forum now.
I feel like a teacher on my first day of class. All right, so y'all please continue to give our ushers your questions, and we'll make it through as many as we can. And Mayor, the first audience question, as most of the questions are for you, Mayor, so heads up on that. Probably not much of a surprise. But this first one is really about picking up on that theme that Nashville Moves raised about you as transit champion. So this is both a suggestion and a question. So the member envisions a Ride with Freddie campaign, and he or she sees it as sort of like a Where's Waldo moment, where folks can take transit, maybe a youth-led campaign where folks can take transit and find you any place in the city as if you were Waldo. So I think the question is, what do you think about that, Mayor?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things of being on the campaign was that one of the things that got the most engagement was if I posted a transit selfie. So people seem to like this. Maybe there is some kind of citywide scavenger hunt we do, but first I have to get Alex on the bus. So you're going to find me somewhere with Alex over the next few weeks.
Mayor, this next question is also for you, and I think it's picking up on David's committee, Nashville Grow's recommendation about locating affordable housing in the East Bank. But the question is broader than that, and it's who will take the leads on all things housing and homelessness?
Yeah, so this one will be, we had a lot of discussion about that, whether these are the same thing or not, and we know that obviously homelessness occurs because of a lack of housing, so I see them as related. But after a lot of discussion last year, I worked on legislation that did establish an office of homeless services in Nashville, and so we do now have a standalone office. April Calvin is here. Thank you, April. And she is sitting right next to Angie Hubbard, who is in the Division of Housing at Metro Planning. So I think the two of them are really the leads within Metro on those, but I will say too, Bob Mendez is our Chief Development Officer, and I know that David's committee in particular is going to shape a lot of his work because he is focused on the East Bank and making sure we get appropriate amounts of housing there, but he's also looking at those other major public land sites. You referenced the Global Mall, that's in that portfolio. We've got a team working with Bob that is going to evaluate that, and I know he is going to make sure he stays in close contact with both Angie and April, but they are here and they are leading that. We've got a homelessness planning council that supports that work as well, and we are driven by the results of an affordable housing task force report. So plenty of work there, two great leaders and one in our office as well.
Thanks, Mayor. I only have one card with this question on it, but I imagine that it is a question on the minds of perhaps more than one audience member. When will the next transit referendum be on the ballot? It may not be a question that you can answer at this moment.
I would say, based on Alex, I feel like your committee's recommendation said we should decide soon. Is that correct? Did you all kick around?
We did, Mr. Mayor, and I didn't mention it. I think and this committee actually spent a whole session, one of our meetings, thinking about this exact question, right? And I believe it's written in the report, so this hopefully, if you've read the report, isn't surprised. We believe, the committee, based on our discussions, is you need to have you need to present this to all of Nashvilleians in an election that would be the most high turnout election, so that all Nashvilleians have a voice and all Nashvilleians have a time to process this. And the most high turnout elections are presidential elections. And so the next presidential election, for those of you who don't know, is November 2024, right? So it's less than a year away now. And so, again, your office will obviously have to coordinate what that means, but our recommendation is you do a presidential election ideally. And I know your enthusiasm to get moving on this. I always push. So I think I would say no. The committee probably would strongly recommend November of 2024, but that is really a political discussion that involves a lot more intricacies, and we recognize that. But really, an election that gives all Nashvilleians an opportunity to evaluate the issue is really what matters.
So, I mean, what I would broadly say to this is we are already, in knowing that we asked you three and these amazing committees to kind of organize around these principles, we're trying to organize the mayor's office too around these. We have a chief development officer supported by a team. Kristen Wilson and Aaron Williams and many others will be working on not just Hub Nashville, but the overall operations and performance of Metro. And then we hope to have a couple of key hires in the very near future to respond to the recommendations of the MOVES report. So I think we'll start there, probably do the analysis they recommend and make a decision again, very soon.
And this is a follow-up, not about the referendum, but also about MOVES. It says transit is important, yet without safety, people would not partake. Alex, do you want to talk some about what the committee, some of the discussions that the committee had about safety?
So I'll preface by saying, I mean, my day job is a trauma surgeon, right? So there's not a week that goes by I don't operate on somebody that's been a victim of an accident on the road, whether it's a bicyclist or a person walking across the street. So this actually is a very personal matter for me, and I know the committee, and I know the mayor actually very much believes that multimodal transportation and transit infrastructure includes safety, includes crosswalks, sidewalks, includes bikeways. We believe this is a huge, important component of this plan, whatever this plan is. It's not just a mass transit thing. It's the infrastructure to get that thing. So for people who want to walk, people who want to bike. And so we think this is a hugely important part of our plan, and a referendum could actually support some of these things because, as I've learned, and if you look at the committee, it's no secret that I'm the least subject matter expert of the great committee members. So I say this in this way is what I've learned is a funding referendum through the Improve Act could actually support the infrastructure that gets you to transit. So that's roads and the sidewalks. So there are lots of positive things that can happen that will improve movement around the city and safety around the city, because we don't need any more pedestrians to be hurt or die because of ill-prepared ways.
And I'll follow up on that, Sean. I think if you talk to, I interpret safety in a whole bunch of different ways, both as a transit user, but as a pedestrian and cyclist as well. And I think if you talk to bus drivers, they want to be safe. During COVID, incidents of intimidation and violence toward bus drivers spiked, and passengers want to be safe at transit centers or wherever they get off the bus. Cyclists and pedestrians not only want to be safe from cars, but also from violence in any community that they might be in. Motorists want to be safe from construction, but also road rage. And so we have a lot of work to do that's comprehensive here. But I think if we make infrastructure choices that are safe, if we give people more options and we activate more parts of the city in ways that bring people into the community, you're going to see some of that safety emerge even as we grow. And Chief Drake is here into a department that has appropriate staffing levels, which is on track for still 2024, if I'm not mistaken, Chief. Yeah, great. Good guy. Thumbs up there.
Thanks, Mayor. All right, this is a question really, and David and Alex, I'm coming your way with it. This questioner asked, were individuals in poverty left out of this process? Did you meet with or include any of them? So David, I thought it might be a good opportunity for you. I know that the Groves Committee met with the folks from Stand Up. Maybe you could talk about that. And then, Alex, I'm thinking about Ashley Northington's work that I'm actually happy to elaborate on as well. But David, let's go to you first.
Yeah, well, to directly answer the question, did we meet directly with people who live in poverty who are affected by this? No, and I would have liked to have had that voice. We met with advocates for people who advocate very strongly for people in communities that have been left out of development in other parts of the city. You mentioned Stand Up Nashville. We met with representatives from Stand Up Nashville. We met with representatives from neighborhood groups who help organize neighborhoods across the city, across sort of the economic spectrum of neighborhoods in our city. And I hope that, you know, when we say that one of our recommendations is that in building neighborhood-based priorities for development, where the idea being that neighborhoods get out ahead of both metro development and private development by having its own assessment of what its needs and its strengths are, that by doing that and engaging in that process, people who live in poverty, people who don't enjoy the economic or the social or the political power of many, that voice should be heard through that process. So that was the intent of our committee, and I wish we had had more time and more resources to meet with a broader cross-section of people, but we did meet with as many representatives of different communities as we could.
Thanks, David. And Alex, I'm wondering, as a committee member, and Ashley, I'm putting words in your mouth here, so you tell me if I'm getting them wrong. So the Moves Committee, as Alex said, was comprised of a bunch of folks who have worked on transit before, but Ashley Northington specifically has worked with transit-dependent riders. And Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but you held meetings all over the city talking to transit-dependent riders about their needs. And I know that I can speak as a committee member just to Ashley's great value in bringing those voices to the table. So that was really helpful. This next question is about Nashville Next.
Shauna, can I jump in too? We did also ask these committees. I think this question is profoundly important, and I think from my experience, both representing the part of the city that had very high per capita poverty, also serving for years on what was the Metro Homelessness Commission and became the Homelessness Planning Council. It's something I'm very committed to. I attended multiple Transit Together meetings, which did exactly that. And we've got standing meetings in the mayor's office with multiple community organizations apart from these committee processes and the transition that are very much engaged with people with lived experience. It is something we're going to absorb this work and make sure that it does address the concerns and needs of people living in the lowest of socioeconomic conditions in Nashville.
Thanks, Mayor. I think we have time for two more questions. The first one is about Nashville Next. And the questioner says, Nashville Next is getting pretty old, given it was put in place more than a decade ago before the explosive growth. How can we grow and move when this remains the guiding document? So I guess the question.
Well, I'll start, but I know the mayor has specific thoughts about this. The way we articulated it in our recommendation was that we thought that the Nashville Next plan was a good foundation. I think that the person asking the question is correct that it is dated the city's development, and its trajectory for development is different than it was 10 years ago. I think there is some planning fatigue that we sensed in our discussions, and so the idea of restarting an entirely new process was something that did not seem attractive with the people that we talked to, so we tried to identify a foundation. But I would agree that the Nashville Next plan is a proper foundation upon which more work should be done.
And I would say to that end, I've had very preliminary conversations with Planning Director Lucy Kemp. I do think Nashville Next remains full of good policy ideas, not all of which have been fully explored or implemented. I know Councilmember Jennifer Gamble, who is now chair of the Planning Committee at Council and will serve on the Planning Commission, kind of worked a little bit in this direction. But as we come up on 10 years of Nashville Next, I do think there's an opportunity to refresh it, probably incorporate priorities of housing, look at a mobility master plan that's also in effect, and try to find some renewed alignment. But I wouldn't say it's something we should throw out. It is a good foundation for where we go from here.
And if I can add one thing to that, one of the things we talked a lot about is the need for that ongoing outreach to continue to solicit information from Nashvillians and continue to build on that. And if I can, I know, Alex, you're very, very aware of the work that Imagine Nashville is doing. So there are other outreach efforts where, you know, hopefully we will get additional input and solicitation of information that can add on to the data that we already have. You know, we talked a lot about the need for continuing to not only look at the data that's available now, such as Nashville Next, but add to it. So there are, I think, a number of projects that are going on that will add an additional layer and help to inform things even more. But I agree, Nashville Next is still a great foundation, a wonderful starting point, and shouldn't be thrown out. But thankfully, there are other sources that I think will kind of go in collaboration with that, that will continue to form a full picture.
Thanks, Christy. So the last question that we'll have time for really takes all of this work as a whole and asks, what can neighbors do to ensure the state, the legislature, and or the governor does not derail the mayor's policy decisions?
Vote.
Mr. Mayor.
I mean, so I do think that is primarily a political question. I do think as we look toward next year, we now have 3 congressional districts in the city of Nashville. We have a variety of state elected officials here, some of which touch other counties. And I think this is also an opportunity to have regional conversations. As mayor, I've already personally invested in going to Regional Transportation Authority meetings, Greater Nashville Regional Council meetings, Mayor's Caucus meetings, and Tennessee Municipal League. Other cities and counties share Nashville's concerns. When we don't manage our growth effectively, it spills over our county line into the counties that surround Nashville. And that means these are shared priorities. The more opportunities we take to be collaborative, the better a result we get, because those city and county mayors, those regional partners in business who participate in organizations like Cumberland Region Tomorrow join with us. I am connected to the mayors of all 4 major cities across Tennessee, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville, joining us in the big city concerns, but the Clarksvilles, the Jacksons, you know, other cities and towns across Tennessee are starting to see signs of growth that are, you know, the concerns we had 6 or 7 years ago about short-term rentals are now reaching other communities that are struggling with those things. And so growth is happening across the state as the entire state of Tennessee becomes a place where people visit. If you're arriving in Nashville, you might wind up in some other part of the state. You might take a road trip to Memphis. You might go see historic Franklin. You might go to Leaper's Fork. There are plenty of places to do road trips. These conversations matter, and it's not a one single thing you can do, but I would absolutely say pay attention to not just the primaries, but the general elections that happen in state election years.
All right, Mayor, I'm going to turn this podium over to you now.
All right, I'm going to come over to it then. Shauna, thank you. And I want to say one other quick thank you in the room to Irma Paz Bernstein, who is here for translating our materials today into Spanish. So thank you for doing that. If you all would help me, thank you. we made a priority during the campaign to make sure we had translated communications, and over the course of the campaign, we had various materials translated into Spanish, Arabic, Kurdish, and I really am grateful to Irma, in no small part because Bob Bernstein is here with her, and they are using this event as their date night today, so thank you. Well, and if you all would help me one more time thank our 3 amazing co-chairs and the committees that worked with them. I hope you can see what I've seen, that they have tackled issues big and small that touch every neighborhood and household in Nashville. When I first started running for mayor, and then again upon being elected, I kept thinking about the city's priorities, the things I had experienced as a homeowner and then a neighborhood leader, a regular transit user, a bike commuter, a parent, and about the city's priorities and what we need to do for Nashvillians to have confidence in our local government and in how we're growing as a city, and then in Nashville overall. And it always circled back to these 3 themes: how we move, how we work, how we grow. How Nashville moves will come to life through investments in more sidewalks, complete streets that anyone can use safely, a meaningful transit system and transportation infrastructure, and traffic management that benefit all Nashvillians. How Nashville works gives us a path to progress on the 15 fixes I talked about during the campaign, but also how we work on customer service and improve quality of life. How Nashville grows is how we take lessons from building part of a city from scratch in the best possible way, and then applying those lessons everywhere. There were some common themes I heard in each of the 3 presentations: accountability, transparency, accessibility, collaboration, community engagement, and participation. Those are the keys toward implementation of this plan and breaking down the silos that prevent us from building a better Nashville for Nashvillians, because that's the goal. A better Nashville for Nashvillians. We want you to live here. Our mission is to make it easier for you to stay. Now, Dr. Jahanger is a busy man. Even while he was co-chairing one of our committees, he's also been co-chairing another important civic process underway independent from government, Imagine Nashville. Imagine Nashville isn't about specific policy. It's not a new plan. This is different. This is about our dreams for Nashville's future and what's most important to us. It is a citizen-led effort, not a Metro initiative. They're doing an important community survey right now, and we're very interested in the results because this is how we connect the work of these committees and the work in this city to our values. The survey is open to all Nashvillians, but it closes on Sunday, November 26th. The website is imaginenashville.org, and I hope you'll take the survey and continue to follow their work. I hope that this conversation doesn't end here in this auditorium. I haven't specifically asked the committee chairs or the committee members if they would do this again, but I think I got asked earlier today, how do we know if we're making progress? And I think the way to do it is to continue to have conversations, maybe with a meal like the ones that David's group had on a weekly basis, to measure the success and progress of these reports. But thank you once again to the committee chairs and the committee members for their work. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. We're looking forward to the work ahead. This concludes this afternoon's program. I wish each of you and your families a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you to everyone here, because I know if you are here today, even the spirit of your civic engagement, if you are not an elected official or Metro department head or Metro employee, we know you're still offering service to the city. So thank you. We're going to make it better together.